this little question which also, undoubtedly, is in the minds of many people. The question is, does one ever have to return to, say, the fourth or third, or even the second or first dimensions after having existed somewhere in the fifth through the ninth dimensions for reasons of having led a wantonly evil life in one of these higher planes? The answer to that is a very definite no. If a person is a naughty boy in the third dimension, he comes back to the third dimension. He does not go to the second. I believe you get the same sort of system in schools. If a student doesn't do his work very well while he is in grade 3, then at the end of term he goes on vacation and has an unpleasant interview with his parents. At the end of the vacation he goes back to school in grade 3. He doesn't get shoved down to grade 1. In the same way, a person struggling along through the school of evolution does not come back to a lower grade but only to the same grade. So if you misbehave or do not learn your lessons properly, then you will be coming back to this poor sorry old earth again, where conditions are going to be a bit worse for quite a long time. People come down to lower dimensions for special purposes. They are volunteers. Do you remember the old army story of volunteers? The sergeant says, "Hey you, I want 10 volunteers, you, and you." Well, perhaps people in much higher dimensions take a look at the earth and shudder at what they see. Then they go back and come to the conclusion that someone, some specialist, will have to return to the earth as a volunteer and find out what is wrong, and then help the people of the earth get on the right path. There are a few snags attached to that, because one of the greatest laws is that you cannot use for your own gain knowledge which you have acquired in a different dimension. You have to live as a denizen of the third dimension, or whatever it is, and make do with the facilities inherent to the third dimension. Another usual reaction is that the volunteer is different, so he or she is persecuted and, all too frequently, disliked because the person is, in effect, a foreign body, a splinter in the body of the earth. You, for instance, if you get a splinter stuck in any 51 part of your anatomy, well, you make quite a commotion until the splinter is dug out. The volunteers have also the painful experience of finding that they are not popular. It doesn't matter who they are. Even Christ was persecuted. Even Gautama was persecuted. Even Moses had more than he could deal with. And during their lifetime they were not popular. They were regarded as nosy Parkers, as do-gooders, etc., etc. Only after such a volunteer has been gone from the earth plane for many years does it dawn on the earth people that, oh well, the person must have been some good after all, and then they write a Bible or two about him. But that doesn't help the volunteer very much, does it? At the present stage, the poor wretched volunteers have a further hazard to the success of their work. The pressmen are always looking out for anyone who is different, and if a person is different he doesn't play ball with the press, and so he gets persecuted and he is called a fake, and that further inhibits the success of what he is trying to do. He may, for instance, be doing very well indeed at his voluntary task, but then some crummy pressman cooks up an entirely imaginary story together with documentary proofs, and that really does cause a very considerable obstacle to a good task. There is another question which fits in well here. The question is, having achieved the ninth dimension, is one crystallized to become one forever with the Creator irrevocably and forever and ever? Well, no, one is never crystallized. There is always something higher to reach for. Do you know the old statement, there is always room at the top of a ladder? I have often referred to the ninth dimension. Okay, let me give you a new target, the 900th dimension. Now, there is no point at all in trying to explain to you what the 900th dimension is, but there is a 900th dimension, and there are some higher. But if you cannot even understand the fourth or the fifth dimension, how can you even begin to understand the 900th? One rises and rises and rises. Of course, if one fights every inch of the way, one is lower to rise, but people always have their opportunities, and I state definitely that no. 52. One is ever destroyed, not even the press people. Hey, you think I am going on about the press people? I have reason to, you know. I have had a lot of trouble with the press people in England and in Germany, in France and, as you will read later, in French Canada too. But no, I am not bitter against the press, I am not bitter against anyone. But it is stupid to sit down like Ferdinand the Bull and just smell the flowers, while some ill-disposed people are trying to cut off one's tail for oxtail soup. Oh no. Do not think that I am bitter, because I am not. Do not think that I am attacking the press unfairly. I am not. I am telling the truth. They are the ones who cook up the tales. But back to our dimensions, old Hitler, or Stalin, or a few others of that type, well, they will not be bumped back to the first dimension, you know. They won't even get bumped back to the second dimension. They will come back to the third. And let me whisper something. Is your ear ready for a nice juicy whisper? Hear it is then. It is a fact that the real villain and tyrant of this life comes back to a new life as a ranting preacher. For instance, a man who has been a real sex pervert in one life may come ranting and preaching against sex in any shape or form, without having any regard as to how the race is to be continued. In the same way, a fellow who was the chief torturer of a very fierce country will come back as a very, very sympathetic doctor, maybe. Things have to be equalized, you see. It is a case of lose one, gain one. You have to balance things out. So if you are a real thug in one life, you come back as an imitation saint in the next, because when you go to the Hall of Memories you see what a mess you made of things. So you return full of bitter remorse, thinking what a scoundrel you were, and you go overboard rather, you overdo things, you become extreme. And so you get a real hearty old sinner coming back as one of these galloping priests who roar around the world teaching people to do nothing except squat on their haunches and bellow out a hymn or two. So, if you get any really good preacher in the next few years, well, it might just be old Hitler come back. Now, how did I get into a bunch of questions like this? What am I having to work out by having myself saddled with? 53. Such queries? Look at this one. Is all creation composed of the vibrations of the musical octave, with most of these octaves higher, or perhaps even lower, than human ears can detect? Everything is vibration, every single thing, even so-called dead matter vibrates, otherwise it could not exist. You get a lump of rock and you can't hear the noise it makes, but some creatures somewhere could. And they perhaps call the rock the Singing Stones or something, which would be a change from the Rolling Stones, wouldn't it? But all vibration is life, all life is vibration, and humans can perceive only the very minutest spectrum of vibrations. There are some places where rocks sing, and there are some places where rocks are, in fact, creatures. They may take 100 years or so to make any movement which would be perceptible to humans. But these creatures, having a few millions of years of life according to Earth standards, are quite satisfied with their rate of movement. In any case, they all go at the same rate, so they don't know what slowpokes they are. This next question logically, I suppose, should have been placed 2 questions higher. The question is,